Okay, this is the fifth video in our series on factoring, and in this video we are going to be examining factoring by grouping. Factor by grouping is a method you can use to factor polynomials containing 4 terms. There's really 2 steps to this. I'm going to go through these steps. I'm going to try and illustrate without using numbers with these sort of color boxes off to the right here. Hopefully this isn't too confusing. If it is, then just kind of go with the flow, and hopefully once we get into some actual examples with numbers and variables, it'll make more sense. Okay, so we're starting out with a polynomial with 4 terms, so that's what I'm trying to illustrate here. Our first step is to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So we're going to start by grouping our first 2 terms and our last 2 terms and focusing just separately on those 2 pairs. We're going to look at the first 2 terms, and we're going to see if there's anything that we can pull out of both of those terms. Oftentimes there'll be a GCF that you can pull out in front. And we will go ahead and do that if it's possible. Then we'll look at the last 2 terms. We'll do the same thing. We'll ask ourselves, is there anything we can pull out of it? Is just these 2 terms? And oftentimes there will be a GCF, and we'll pull that out in front as well. So now, at this point, we're really dealing with 2 new terms. One of them contains a GCF and a binomial. The other one also contains a GCF and a binomial. There would be a plus or a minus or something in between those 2 things. In step 2, we're going to take a common factor out of these 2 terms. So if it turns out that these 2 binomials that you created when you split it up into that form right there, if they are exactly the same, then what we can do is we can take those things, we can factor them out. It's just like pulling out a GCF. We'll pull them out in front, except this time our GCF is actually going to be a binomial. And then we're going to have a couple things left over inside when we do that, and those things are going to stay inside of the parentheses. All right, now sometimes you're going to see that those 2 binomials, the ones that I've got in green here, do not match exactly, but the signs are off in one of them. In that case, usually that means you're going to have to factor a negative out in front instead of a positive. If you look at the extra examples, you'll see a couple of the last 2 examples for this topic. You'll see some examples where that happens, and you can see what happens there. It's not terribly difficult to deal with, but it is important that you make those binomials match up. Okay, so if that was totally confusing, then here's an actual numerical example, and hopefully we'll be able to get through this and make it less confusing for you. So I'm going to start with that first step. And here we're going to focus just on the first 2 terms, grouping those together, and then separately on the last 2 terms, grouping those together. For our first 2 terms, we want to look and ask ourselves the question, is there anything that we can pull out of that 2x cubed and that 5x squared? Now 2 and 5 do not have a common factor. However, they do both have x's. So we should be able to pull an x. Actually, we should be able to pull a couple of x's out of each one of those. That's going to leave us with a 2x and a 5 left inside. All right, let's do the same thing with the last 2 terms. We got an 8x and a 20. And 4 goes into both 8 and 20. So I'm going to pull a positive 4 out in front. That's going to leave us with 2x plus 5. Okay, now I'm looking really at 2 terms here. Each of them has a GCF out in front, and then each of them also has this binomial here. And if you notice, the binomial in both of these is exactly the same. So we're going to take this identical binomial, and we're going to factor it out of this thing. So from the whole expression, we're going to be pulling that 2x plus 5 that's common in the whole thing. Be pulling that out in front. Now, when I pull that out in front, what's it going to leave behind on the inside? That would be an x squared and a positive 4. I'll look at those 2 factors that we have remaining, see if there's anything else we can factor out. And there's not. Now, if that had been an x squared minus 4, we could factor that further, but in this case, we are done. So our final factored version is going to be 2x plus 5 times the quantity x squared plus 4. You can find some more videos of these further down the playlist.